So this is the seventh time we've been recording now, and it's been fun.
Nvidia's GTC conference.
So that happened last week, and I saw a bunch of things characterizing the event as the new Apple standard, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
because there were a lot of people who were hyped on it and a lot of excitement in the
Yeah.
room. So all the buzz coming out of the event has been around excitement and the same feelings that people used to have in the early days of Apple when Steve Jobs was presenting. Did you hear much of that same reaction or
I mean, yeah, I saw it. I didn't know if it was like I find the event like Nvidia's events are they're kind of boring.
yeah.
What I mean by that is, yeah, the comparison to Apple is just. I mean, I get it. Nvidia right now, it's just the hot thing right now. It's the hot, like it's top of mind for everybody, just because of the stock price. To be honest, right? Man, those filler words, right? Like, anyways, the one thing that it's not the same is that a lot of people don't know what GPUs do. It's not like you go out and buy an Nvidia GPU, and so that's why I think it's just more. I feel it's just hype just because AI is a thing. Nvidia just happens to produce the chips that are kind of like the basis for big tech training their data, and then eventually it will kind of power I guess, the intelligence uh, of how
Oh,
these models work.
I want to I want to address your statement though. It's not like you go out and buy a GPU. Isn't that what the GeForce graphics card is?
It is, but again, even the the GeForce graphics cards, I mean, for all intents, like your normal everyday consumer is not buying a
Mm-hmm.
GPU, right? It's mostly people are into gaming.
Nerds.
Actually, that is the market. People who actually game build an actual PC, and so yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I'll call them power users, even though not all of them are power users, but really they're just gamers.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's a
and so
segment, but
yeah, but
um,
like Apple, right? People go out and buy phones. You go out and buy a computer. You go out and buy whatever Apple TV is. Um, they actually have products that an everyday consumer would buy versus the GPU is just not. It's not mainstream in that way, right?
well, that's interesting though because if you think about Apple in the early days,
Mm-hmm.
when their whole magic and focus was how do they make good consumer products,
Mm-hmm.
and their whole success around how they market is marketing for the everyday consumer, right? Like they talk about how this product is going to change your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the internals or like the technicals of a product. Although they make it a point to talk about specs and whatnot to satisfy
Yeah.
the more astute consumer who cares about those things. But in the early days, I'm not. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because maybe today people don't buy GPUs, but in the future, like what is the opportunity there, right? Because
Mm.
in the tech world, we know, like for me, I know a lot of people who buy GPUs, but they're like you said, they're all nerds, gamers,
Mm-hmm.
programmers, crypto miners,
Yep.
and it's a very niche but big and profitable segment.
Yeah.
Is this the start of Nvidia going mainstream somehow, um, for the consumer in the future,
Mm-hmm.
based around AI? Maybe that's the question I wonder now that you say that.
I mean, potentially, maybe if they did something with this project Groot. By the way, Groot, as in what is this? Generalist Robot 00 technology. Um, a general purpose foundation model for humanoid robots. So maybe, they could start to produce their own like their own product. I mean, let's see. The only thing I know that Nvidia actually markets is whatever Nvidia Shield, right? It's their kind of like their version of Apple TV,
Hmm.
Roku.
I didn't know they
But
had
it's
one. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's based on Android. I use it, and I find it's way better than um, all the other products. Well, Apple TV is pretty good, but
Mhm.
it's Android based. It's not something Nvidia has built custom. Um,
And I think
but
that's
I mean,
okay. I think it's okay to be
yeah.
Android based. I feel like this opens up the door for Nvidia to build on this momentum, this wave, and start thinking about a strategy for potential consumer products, right? Be how can
Mm-hmm.
Nvidia be the next Apple in
Mm-hmm.
10 years because they have a good
Mm-hmm.
foundation already. They have the technology to do so and the hardware and the
Mm-hmm.
internals to do so, but
Yeah.
now they just don't have the actual products, right? But I think I could imagine a future where Nvidia has a steady, highly profitable stream of GPU creation, right, going on.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a
Mm-hmm.
ton of money now because their market cap and their stock price has gone up so much in the last few years.
Yeah.
And so now can they set aside, billions of dollars, for example, to start doing R&D on a consumer arm?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of AI specific products that are being launched these days. Like what is it, the
Mm-hmm.
human pin? You have this other thing I heard about. I don't know. You have heard about it called a Rabbit, which is built off of, which is using Perplexity AI. These
Mm.
are all like consumer devices that are actually just trying to
Yeah.
um, exploit AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I could imagine NVIDIA building a bunch of consumer products, including like home robots,
Yeah.
um, and potentially be like the next Apple. Uh,
Maybe.
yeah. But it's a big bet.
Maybe.
But that's what will
Yeah.
get
I
them
mean,
to U.S. or global dominance like Apple has.
yeah. Yeah, I think Jensen cited like the R&D budget for Blackwell was $10 billion. I think that probably gives a sense of how much they spend on a specific chip. I don't know. I mean, it could be right, or it could be they're fine being like the foundational hardware for basically anybody in this particular space.
Which they have been for the
Um,
last 10 plus years.
yeah, which they have been. I don't know. Maybe the money makes them decide to expand, but again, they're missing all of that, right? Because they've only been like a chip company for all intents, and they don't even produce their own chips anymore, right? It's all outsourced.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And so that's why being a board member or being, you know, Jensen, right? Like, what do you think about in terms like how do you capitalize on this momentum? I
yeah.
don't know. To me, that's like intriguing thought. That's one way. Um,
Hmm.
but who knows? We'll have to pay attention in the next few years to see like what hires they make or what
Yeah.
you know what they start delving
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
Because to your point, they could totally just be the backbone of computers and computerization, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty known that Nvidia likes to invest in different companies, and the way they talked about it was pretty interesting in that so Nvidia does have these large, well, not large, but they just have a lot of different investments in different companies that aren't hardware related. I don't have it. I don't remember off the top of my head. But basically, the idea is that Nvidia invests and funds these companies that these AI companies at the moment that inevitably will need to buy Nvidia's GPUs or products in order to get their company, for the things they're doing. And so it's more like they're taking this money and investing it in other companies that will need Nvidia's products, and that's kind of how like they're growing. Because when those companies take off, right, they buy more
Hmm.
GPUs, Nvidia makes more, and so they're just buying in and creating their own demand. Um, if you really thought about it, right?
Yeah.
I guess it's an interesting way to do it versus instead of trying to figure out like how do you expand your own.
Um, well, I think that's a good strategy. But we all know, I think the biggest companies, they own and they do a lot of their stuff in house. Uh,
Mhm.
I don't know. It's
We'll
very
see.
fascinating because Nvidia has for the most part just been in my eyes has been dormant for the last 20
Mm.
years. I mean, I've always
Mm.
known Nvidia, right? They're the graphics company. Like
Yeah.
you can't play games
Yeah.
unless you have a
Yeah.
GeForce or Nvidia
Right.
graphics card.
Yeah.
And then in 2020, 2021, when crypto started booming again, oh, like they are needed for crypto mining, and there's all these
Yeah.
crypto miners trying to build businesses that are gobbling up all these GPUs. So now
Yeah.
they're that, like Nvidia's
Yeah.
that, and now they're the AI. They're
Yeah.
the AI company. You can't build AI without Nvidia.
Hmm.
Super interesting to me. I mean, how and it just shows that um, at any moment in time, a company can change, right? Like,
Hmm. Yeah. Whether they choose to try and pursue something on the consumer side, maybe, but um, yeah, Jensen's an engineer, right? And so seeing the company move away from what they've done, I don't know. I don't know if it's something he would want to do. Maybe it's into robotics. I mean, they kind of built it around this new model. Again, it is a business venture that should drive right more demand for the chips that Nvidia builds. So whether that
yeah.
is invest in more chips or invest in something that makes use of your chips, maybe.
Well, some of the highlights from the event that I saw is, so they announced Blackwell, which is their new chip, and it's 2.5 times faster than Hopper in training AI,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it's 5 times faster than its Hopper architecture at interference, which is the process by which AI models can draw conclusions. The other things that were I mean, one other things I saw in it were just seems they had a partnership with everyone. I don't know if that was like part of the strategy, but it
Yeah.
just had so many partnerships with all the big names, and so
Yeah.
that's good. And then
Yeah.
the robot segment was also pretty entertaining to me. They had a bunch of robots on the stage, and two of the robots that he interacted with that came out
Mhm.
were
They were. He called out Disney at some point. They
yeah,
were
he
like
did,
this. They were like Star Wars droids, like the droids from Star Wars.
and he was interacting with them, and it was cute.
It's kind of cheesy. It was cheesy. But I feel like he does that. He's like it's so awkward sometimes. But that's his thing. Um, but yeah. So I mean, overall, it was cool. I think there was just a lot of expectations going into it. You know, stock price kind of tanked a little bit, but ended the week near
Thousand
all
years.
time highs.
Well,
But anyways, yeah.
related stories to this. One is over last week, China had actually signed some things that are blocking government usage of Intel and
Hmm.
AMD chips, and
Yeah.
so that's just you know a technology war, I guess. Meaning,
Yeah.
China doing some things to block our products from being used there. While it's
Hmm.
only for the government, it is something. But last week we were talking about how they ban social networks, and
Yeah.
we are close to enacting a bill that bans
Hmm.
TikTok, and so there's this
Yeah.
whole technological um,
Yeah.
war going on between China and US that will always continue.
It's kind of a weird ban though, because like they banned Intel or they want to ban Intel, AMD, but they really want Nvidia, right? But the U.S. government has banned Nvidia from basically selling, like, again, like these Blackwells or H100, like they're high end
Yeah.
GPUs to China, because the fear is China is using this to advance their AI. I'll just call it their AI technology, right? So it's kind of
Is
funny
that
they
China's
banned Intel,
strategy then?
AMD, but not Nvidia, huh?
Yeah, is that China's strategy? Like block these two, so that way U.S. has to open up Nvidia. If
But yeah,
yeah,
it's like, why?
yeah,
It's like US is like would prefer, yeah. I mean, from the US side, I'm pretty sure, like, all right, go ahead. We
yeah,
don't want you to have our high end, our high end chips for a reason,
yeah.
right? So yeah, so I'm sure the U.S. was like, great, we didn't want you to have any of them anyway, so please don't import them.
Well, related.
But I mean, they don't. They'll probably just steal the technology anyways.
Yeah,
That's what they'll do, right? They have no. It's probably too harsh to say, but I don't believe it's too far fetched. I mean, they have no ethics around it, right? So whatever gets them ahead, they do. So they'll steal the
I mean they probably
intellectual
already have,
property.
or they already have tried to.
They,
Well, related to that, the other thing that happened here on U.S. grounds is the Biden administration injected money into Intel in terms of building up production plants here on the U.S. to start fabricating chips.
mm,
For those of you who don't know, like Taiwan Semiconductors produces the vast amount of chips for all semiconductor companies globally, and
mm,
so there's a heavy reliance on and dependency on Taiwan semiconductors right now, and there's risk there, right? Because
mm,
speaking of China, China does decide one day that they want to like regain Taiwan, that as they've always been dangling in front of the world for quite a while now, then there's
yeah,
risk there of our chip manufacturing taking a hit. And so I think it's a good move, and it'll be interesting to see how it benefits Intel. I did, for you to know, this is not financial advice, but I did shift around some of my, in the previous episode, I talked about my chip acronym Mangot.
yeah, yeah.
Um, it did not have Intel,
Mm,
but when this news came out, I actually added Intel to that slice. So now I
mm,
guess it's
okay,
Mangotti,
okay.
and put some money in Intel.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah,
Okay,
dollar cost
Intel
averaging
is,
into it.
yeah. All right. Well, I wish you luck on that one. Intel is just such a laggard. Yeah. I'm kind of glad they're suffering.
Ouch.
Like, again, I feel like AMD is probably the one who's been the only competition for either side of it. So, right, Intel has been focused on CPUs, Nvidia has been focused on GPUs. Without AMD, I mean, a lot of people probably don't remember this, but when Intel was the major CPU maker producer, I mean, they
When they had all the
would
commercials with the
Intel Inside,
the
yeah,
colorful
yeah,
suits.
yeah. But without AMD, right? Intel was their CPUs were super expensive. They were super slow to innovate and really do anything with their Pentium chips, right? Until AMD started to really leapfrog and gain traction, that Intel was like, oh crap, we gotta lower prices, and that's when Intel started to really try to innovate their CPUs. And the same thing with Nvidia. Before AMD, like, man, they would just like charge so much, and they would try and force down like new technology in their chips to like drive the industry in the direction that Nvidia wanted, right? Until AMD, arguably they haven't done as well with GPUs as they did with CPUs, but they've managed to still stay close enough that Nvidia is watchful of them,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like, yeah, but Intel just has not been doing well. I don't know. Nowadays they're just not as good. But
I agree. I don't disagree with
anyways,
you. The next story is a big thing that happened over the last week, which is Apple. Apple was sued by the U.S. Justice Department. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's a big one, and then their stock went down about, I'd
A lot.
say, like 5% in one day almost, but then
Yeah.
leveled out around 3 to 4%.
Mm-hmm.
But they're being sued by the U.S. Justice Department because they're being accused of monopolization. But the way that they're being
Mm-hmm.
accused of monopolization is uh, that their walls have been too closed to competitors, and they've engineered incompatibility. And so what that does is it makes other products that compete with theirs, as an example, like the Sony headphones, for example, that competes with Apple's AirPods. Attorney General's office articulated it like this: Apple has locked its consumers into the iPhone while locking its competitors out of the market. And some examples are um, diminishing capabilities of non Apple smartphones, um, limiting access for third party wallet, contactless payments, for example, or refusing capabilities for messaging. Y'all have heard about the green bubble that you get when you get a text message from Android. I think like when you send videos from Android to an iPhone, it's compressed more than if you were to send from an Apple to an Apple device. Um, and those are just some examples of how this has come about. It's very similar. This is not a news story for in other ways, like Fortnite, for example. I think sued or complained about how Apple was not allowing them to operate effectively because of the way that their app store policies were enacted. There's a lot of different different ways that Apple uh, engineers these things. But yeah, that's what happened last week, which was the big news. Um, what are your thoughts on it?
Um. So it's kind of weird how it felt like the DOJ was stretching because they basically tried to redefine what a smartphone is in order to make it look like Apple potentially could be a monopolist. But if you really look at it from a global standpoint, they don't have the market that's such high market share. I think the way the DOJ framed it was like Apple had like 70 or 80% of the smartphone market. But if you look at it from a global perspective, like Android has way more market share than
Mhm.
Apple does. And so, it feels like a stretch. I kind it's like I can kind of see where they're going, but then again, Apple is built on the idea of marrying, right, hardware, software, experience into this walled garden type thing, right? And and if people don't remember technology way back then, it was kind of like a mishmash of things like with PCs. Yeah, you had Windows operating system, you had all these different components, and so the way Microsoft had to build their Windows operating system, it had to account for like thousands and thousands of combinations of potential hardware that would power a computer, right? And so the difference with how Apple's approach is they build the hardware, that way they can build the software to work as best and efficiently as possible with the hardware. And that's kind of how Apple has grown into this, huge, one of the, huge tech
It's
companies.
a big
And
ecosystem.
so, yeah, this ecosystem that they've built up, that they build the hardware and so they can build the best software because they know what hardware can do. And so, they've grown so big that now at this point, people think, oh, you guys are taking advantage of your market position as a monopoly to basically prevent competitors from, being on your platform. But in my mind, whether this is right or wrong, it's like, well, they, by inch, actually, this is probably the best point they made is like, So what the DOJ is basically saying is you want another Android, right? All the things that they've outlined is like things that Android does, and arguably because of that, Android is a lesser operating system, or and I kind of agree with that. Like I used Android at one point, but they were prone to get hacked. It was very easy for people to, it's just hard to use. Things wouldn't work as great all the time. And so, I'm largely, well, I am, part of in that Apple ecosystem for exactly what Apple described. They focus on privacy, right? They make a large portion of their money off the hardware, not necessarily off selling your data, right? And so it does. It resonates from a consumer, normal, everyday user perspective. Like it just works, and that's
Yeah.
why I continue to buy it. That's why I also like my parents. I have my parents buy it because it's easy. Like I don't have to worry about them accidentally downloading some strange app and getting their phone hacked and all their information stolen and their bank accounts, because our phones are basically our lives at this point, right? It's not something you want easily hacked or information easily leaked or stolen, etc. And
Yeah.
so it's I get it, monopoly, they charge high prices, but Apple has always charged high price. That's the premium we pay for it. I don't know,
Yeah.
I guess we'll see. I can see arguments on both sides, but for
No,
me it's like, yeah.
I'm with you on this one. I think one thing I'm interested to know is, are they doing that purposely, or is it that these other companies just can't keep up with the technology, or don't want to implement the compatibility technology to actually work better with Apple products? And
Mhm.
that goes is there's that's a double edged sword. Is the door open for these other uh, hardware products to integrate better with Apple, or is Apple actually saying that, or has Apple actually engineered things that just don't make it compatible? I think that's what I'm interested to see that's coming out of this investigation. I'm also with you. Like, you're either an Android, you either love Android or you love iPhone. I'm in the Apple ecosystem myself. Like, I just feel better using these devices. They integrate so well
Mhm.
with each other.
Mhm.
Now, you know, that's a winning strategy. That's a winning thing that Apple did, because every time I have to make a consideration for buying a new device,
Mhm.
like a TV or a watch or a laptop, because of the ecosystem, it influences my decision. I'd rather buy an
Mhm.
Apple device than a non-Apple device, because I know when I plug it in, it's just going to work right away.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, quite honestly, I don't think anything's going to come from this. Like, I think Apple stock's going to dip for a bit, but it'll be right back up there in a couple months.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what the early version of this looks like, at least in Europe, right? Just because of the DMA. And so in Europe, the DMA has basically affected Apple in that they have to let other people uh, be able to use other payments, et cetera, et cetera. I don't remember the detail. I don't remember the details. But basically, yeah, we'll see what the early effects of this is, at least in Europe, um, as far as like allowing other app stores onto iPhone devices, and we'll see what type of issues crop up because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, let's wrap it up with a last mention of this last story I wanted to resurface from our last week's conversation.
that's
That's
right.
Reddit's
We kind of
IPO.
made bets on what would happen.
So for you to know, I did not invest in the IPO. I think I was talking about that.
Yeah.
But the reason why I decided not to is, when I went to go confirm my purchase on SoFi
Mm-hmm.
to get into the IPO price at $34,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, there were some disclaimers around, if you sell, like, you have to, you should hold it on for at least 120 days. If you sell before
Mm-hmm.
then, it could impose some extra fees. And
Oh, really?
they said it could be
Hmm.
like $50, a $50 fee to sell, for example, which in the long run actually is not a lot if you're up, 50%, which Reddit was.
Wait, $50, like a $50 per trade, right? Not like a $50
That's what wasn't
per.
clear to me.
Huh.
So I didn't want to risk it, basically. And
Okay.
so I decided not to confirm my purchase. I just let it go.
Uh,
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's up. It went up like 50+% in the first day of trading. It came back down to
yeah.
like 30% above. I think it closed the week at around 40. I think
46.
so. It's not,
45.96.
yeah, so it's not
So
that.
46. Let's just call it $46.
So I mean, it's up a pretty good amount. But here's what I expect. I expect it to come down under IPO price in the next few months here, and that's
So
what I'm watching.
you're agreeing with me. You're agreeing with me now.
Well, I didn't not agree with you last week. I think I had said, yeah, I'd probably go up in the first week and then come down. I think that's what you said. I did not agree with you. So yeah, I decided not to go in on that. Plus, my situation right now with unemployment and all that stuff, it's like no need to risk money I don't need to risk.
Yeah, you don't want to take an instant 25% hit.
Yeah. But yeah, Reddit did good on the first day. Obviously, the people who are at Reddit can't sell because usually when your company goes public, there's a blackout period, typically 3 months or so. So if you're a Reddit employee, congratulations to you for seeing your stocks finally become liquid, and hopefully it stays around this price by the time you're able to sell. At the same time, you're still up from when you joined, most likely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see. This one has meme potential. So
yeah. All right. Well, that was a good episode 7. Good topics, and we're getting better at this, making it shorter for you all because we found that actually is something that you seems to be something you like, is a shorter format.
Seems to work better. Yeah.
So we'll continue doing that.
It's like, hopefully, interesting to say. We can definitely say it in shorter ways.
Yeah.
Practice makes perfect.
All right. Well, have a great week, Tony.
Yeah, you too.